I can still remember that portrait taken in 1962. I I was walking down Corporation Street in Birmingham, and I looked in the shop window, and there was this beautiful suit, and I thought, my God, I've got to have that, you know. And so I went into the shop and I tried it on, and it fitted me perfectly. And I thought, oh yes, I want to take a picture of this to send to them in Jamaica. I went off, I got dressed up, and I went to the photographic studio and Soho Road in Handsworth, and I took that photo. That way it was done, and the rest is history. It was important to send back pictures from here so that your relatives and friends could see that you have landed safely and that you're doing well. You know, so the idea of dressing up and looking good, you must dress up and look good. Dressing up as if you're going to church, you know? That was the idea. And your family could show the photos around. I remember that. I remember seeing pictures of people from here and I knew how they look. So I know, for instance, I wanted to take a picture in that suit because I looked good in that suit.
Really, it was discovering that studio portrait of Maurice in 1983 that kick-started my investigation into images of black settlement um, in the UK, and which prompted me then to contact Stuart Hall, who, of course, wrote one of the most important articles that Ten.8 ever published. Um, I think what was important about that was the way, although that portrait is powerfully inscribed with the conventions of Edwardian portraiture, um, it nevertheless broke free and escaped from those conventions, and provided a unique document about the presence and the arrival of black people into the UK, Caribbean black people into the UK.
With 10.8, the invitational was more participatory. It was more like, well, actually, how can we work across together to kind of think through some of these things? And it's through that kind of invitation and that process where we came up with Black Image, which was the follow up, I would say, to Black Image. And really the one where myself and Stuart Hall really produced the idea around what is the future agenda around black representation in relation to that. Really important because it was a way in which we brought together film, photography, people from literature. The interesting thing about 10.8 and at that time was its eclectic use of bringing people together from multidisciplines that were really had a heartfelt interest in the question of the documentary and the documentary movement in Britain, but also in the global sphere. So for me, this is something which actually was trying to unpack stuff within the British national kind of arena, but also within the global arena.
The issues we have here today, body politic, staying on, they overwhelm me because my work up to that point has been documentary of Handsworth, and I had a crisis having read 10.8 about being a documentary photographer. I kind of felt bad, even though it was my home, documenting people, often without permission, purely and simply because of the incredible work and the incredible writing that I kind of consumed. I was insatiable for in 10.8. And what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say context is half the work. There's a saying with the Artist Placement Group, which was a 1960s bunch of activists who thought that art and knowledge and power really should be something that's engaged with by artists and practitioners, academics, writers, anybody with any kind of creative talent. He has to be engaged with outside of the gallery, has to be engaged with outside of the fine art school. It has to be in society, and that's what 10.8 did. 10.8 gave me a context for the work. It gave me a context for the representation of people, and it gave me an understanding of the importance and the legitimacy of a visual language and a visual practice, the importance of having alternative visual languages, sometimes which were informed by writers, but ultimately context is half the work, and that's an artist placement statement, but really it's a 10.8 statement. I'd argue really strongly that 10.8 is responsible for what we now know as socially engaged practice, and that's a really bold claim. But it's a truism because ultimately I was there, I saw it happen, and I was in the room when those ideas, which we now take as common parlance within photography in terms of representation and having a voice to tell your own stories, those things were discussed. And how you are inclusive, those things were discussed 30 years ago before you have the agenda that we have today.